What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode. Today we're working on Nate's 2006 Speed 6. We already did a lot of work to it by pulling the whole front end off, the radiator core support, obviously the bumper cover, and some other components. This car's been stuck in limp mode for a while, and we went through a bunch of diagnostics with the Cobb tuner that Nate bought for it, and then I had a friend come over. We put a new computer in it, reprogrammed the computer, and it's still stuck in limp mode. So the codes that were hiding in the background were O2 sensors and number one injector stuck. So we decided to go ahead and start tearing it apart and doing some serious overhauling of the things that we have available to us. So because we had two parts cars, we had some extra components. We decided to get another intake manifold and prepped for it since we had a couple spare ones. So we have this one here, and we're going to be painting the valve cover also, since we'll be pulling all that off. And we're going to be putting in all new fuel injectors. So we have all new Corksport fuel injectors we're going to put in. We had already replaced the throttle body, so we'll be putting this throttle body back on the new intake manifold. What else are we doing? We're going to be ripping out the stock downpipe, the catalytic converter, and the resistor will be coming off. So we'll be replacing that with the downpipe. So it's QuickWorks. I think it's QuickWorks downpipe, and then we have the QuickWorks exhaust. I don't know if you could see that back there. So we have the exhaust right here that came off of one of the parts cars. So we'll be putting that on also. Right now, Nate's car is straight piped off of a stock downpipe. There's no mufflers on his car. It actually sounded pretty good with that setup. So we're going to be replacing the downpipe for a catless downpipe from QuickWorks. And I think this is Cobb exhaust. Nate's saying Cobb, so I think it is Cobb. We're going to be replacing a lot of the plastic loom on his car. And what else, Nate? What else are we doing to this that I'm forgetting? I know we put all brand new spark plugs in it. We put all new coil packs in it. We're going to be replacing the AC line because that one right there had a hole in it. I had put JB Weld on it, but we actually have two sets of spare AC lines that came off parts cars. We have a whole new radiator core support for it with a all aluminum radiator we're going to be putting in. That's all going to be going on, so stay tuned. We got all new vacuum hoses, all new radiator hoses.
Still looking the same. We have everything new.
Everything that's going to be going on. So stay tuned to this episode. It's going to be a lot of work. All right, so we just, Nate finished taping everything off. We got him hung up here in the basement. We're going to crack that window open for ventilation. Got the valve cover all cleaned up and the intake all cleaned up. Prep for paint. Here goes nothing. All right, we got the first couple coats of gold on the intake manifold. Looking real good. And on the valve cover. I'll let that dry overnight and come back and put a couple more coats on it tomorrow. All right, so we've added the gold paint and clear coat on these. Came out pretty good. Here's the valve cover, you can see. Looks pretty good. The intake is all painted. Put about 4 coats of gold, 4 coats of clear on here. You can see it's pretty shiny. Came out pretty good. And we just used this VHT engine metallic gold and engine metallic gloss clear. It's treated for 650 degrees on the gold, 550 degrees on the clear. Engines don't usually get to be more than 200 degrees, maybe 210 tops. So I think it's plenty for the paint. Paint, we put it on there nice and thick. You can see how shiny it came out. The only visible part of this thing you're going to see is this piece from the top. You know, might be able to see a little bit of the side here, but overall came out real good. Looking forward to putting this back on after we disassemble the engine components that we're swapping out. We're going to be swapping out the fuel rail next. So let's go ahead and get started on the intake manifold removal so we can get to that fuel rail. All right, so we're back out working on the engine. I just removed the battery and the battery tray, and I'm starting to work on removing this air induction box here. So that just bolts up with a 10 millimeter right here. And then I'm working on taking the vacuum hoses off of it. This one vacuum hose that was going into it right here. You can see it here in the video, but the little plastic nipple just broke right off. So I'm gonna try to see if we can fix that, so we can put the new hose on it. That was pretty seized on there. But we have to work on getting the O2 sensors off. I've taken the heat shield off the top of the exhaust manifold. I'm working on taking the rest of it off the bottom. It's starting to get loose here on the bottom. So there's a bunch of 8 millimeter bolts. I snapped one up here, snapped another one down here on the side for the lower half here. So I'm still working on taking this off. I'm actually going to remove this O2 sensor next, so I have more room to get these other bolts underneath the exhaust manifold to finish getting this heat shield off, because I want to work on getting this downpipe removed. And you can see there's a bunch of, I don't know if you can see down there, but there's a bunch more 10 millimeter bolts down there. So that's what I'm working on right now. As you saw earlier, we have the intake manifold already painted, so we're going to be replacing this. I'm working on taking this fuel rail cover off. This fuel rail cover has a bolt down here and another one up here, they're 10 mils. And then there's 2 more on the side here. There's the fuel rail, but the bolts for the cover, there's one back there, you can see it right there. And there's one right on the bottom, you can't really see it. So I gotta get this cover off. The EGR pipe's already loosened up. What else? We took the dipstick off the manifold. I gotta unclip this harness that's attached here still. Nate, my son, also bought a oil filter adapter kit. It basically eliminates this whole setup here, and you can put a regular screw-on filter instead of the paper cartridge that goes up underneath. So we're going to be doing that here in a little bit also. So we just got to move some stuff around and keep working. All right, so we got the intake manifold off. I'm working on taking the 10 mils off this fuel rail, and then I'm going to go in and get these torque bits off. They're T40s. All those bolts right back in here. So those are going to be fun to get off, because I actually snapped 2 T40s on the parts car. So I'm going to be working on taking this fuel rail off, and then I'm going to continue taking off the exhaust manifold in the back next. All right, so still working on taking this fuel rail off. I started working on some other stuff, like getting ready to pull the starter out, because we're going to replace the starter also. So I got the harness off. We also started disconnecting the oil cooler here, took the coolant lines off. Going to be replacing this whole unit. We decided to replace this entire clutch slave cylinder. I might be replacing all the way back to the master cylinder, but this stuff's pretty rusty and crusty. I have all this from other cars, from other parts cars that I've had, so I'm probably going to clean that up and replace it. Right now I've taken off the heat shield for the upper part of the downpipe. I've already removed 3 of the bolts for the downpipe. You can see I have one more and then another one below that. But back here I've already removed 3. So 1, 2, and then there's another one you can't see right here. Next I'm going to remove the alternator. I have a new alternator for this car anyway. This car's been having some charging issues. So I have a new alternator for this car anyway, so I'm going to replace that. But I'm not going to replace the new one now. I'm just going to pull the old one out so I can clear some room for installing, and actually for removing the downpipe and then installing the new one, the new turbo, basically clean up the whole back of the motor so that we can put everything on, and then I'll put the alternator on last before we finish assembling and everything. All right, so we got the fuel rail off finally. My buddy Mike took a hammer and a torque bit T40 and was able to get them off. Only snapped one more T40. That's a total of 3 T40s to remove 4 bolts. We were able to get the turbo off and the exhaust manifold off. It was not easy, but it was able to come off. You got to be careful with this oil line right here. So this oil line has 2 8mm bolts going up into the turbo, and the other 2 are down here. See if you can see that. Yeah, right there. So there's one off right there. I couldn't get to the other one, but I was able to get it off the back of the turbo right here. So I'm going to mount the new turbo on, hook up the oil lines, bolt that all up, and then get the exhaust manifold on. I was also obviously able to take the factory downpipe off. That is off and sitting somewhere. And we also took off all the factory exhaust and put the new Quick Werks exhaust on already. I'll show you that here in a second. All right, so we removed all the old turbo, the old downpipe. I just mounted up the new turbo. The Cst4 turbo is mounted. Mounted up the 2 coolant lines. So there's one down here. You can barely see it right there. And then the other one's up top, right there. Runs down to the block right there. So now I still have the turbo loose, the bolt on the bottom loose, only so I can mount up the header on top. So I'm going to go ahead and mount up the exhaust manifold or header, whatever you want to call it, right on top. I have this pipe loose right now. Also, I didn't tighten this one back here because I have to mount up the exhaust to the quick works system. All right, we got the header all bolted up, turbo all bolted up, got all the bolts in place, got the downpipe in place. We're going to put the O2 sensors in tomorrow. Got the turbo all bolted in. We're going to run new hoses for all this stuff on the wastegate here. We mounted up everything on this side. Gonna keep going here and we'll finish up hopefully tomorrow.